In episode 1, we built the strategy. In episode 2, we turned the strategy into an operating plan, how the company actually runs. Now we're moving into the next layer. And this is where most companies break. They either jump straight into execution or they write OKRs that look good, but don't actually measure anything that matters or is connected to the strategy or the operating plan. So today, we're going to fix that. We're going to take the operating plan and turn it into OKRs that actually tells us if we're making real progress. That's the goal. But as we've started with the other episodes, let's start with what OKRs actually are. OKRs are not a to-do list, a project plan, a wish list. OKRs are a measurement system. They answer one question. Are we making real progress on what matters most? If your OKRs describe work, you're not measuring progress. You're describing activity. So, this is the big mistake and where teams go wrong. They sit down and ask, what should our OKRs be this quarter? That's the wrong question because now you're just guessing. OKRs should come directly from your operating plan, which, if you remember, should come directly from your strategy. So you don't just invent OKRs. You derive them from your strategy and I almost said OKRs, and your operating plan. That is what fuels your OKRs. And so people who have a challenge of coming up with OKRs is because they're not pulling from the foundational layer that we've done in the past few episodes. All right, let's talk about the bridge. We're going to connect the system. Strategy, for a reminder, creates the constraint. What are we going to focus on? What are we not going to do? It defines where we're going to play within that time frame. A year, 3 years, 10 years, whatever you decide. If it's 10 years or even 3 years with AI, I kind of go back to the drawing board. I think 1 year is even pushing it these days, but I think it's a good starting point. All right. Now, the operating plan, as the reminder for this one, distributes that constraint across the timeline. For us, in our example, is that year. It tells us what matters and where we need to put focus. Now, OKRs do something different. They make that focus measurable. So we ask, what would meaningful progress look like this quarter based off what we defined in our strategy and our operating plan? That's where OKRs should come from. And so for us to do that, we're going to go, like we've done in the past, to the template to help show you how you can actually do this in your organization. Okay, so what we're going to do, if you want to follow along, go to grapevineworkplace.com. You'll see it right there. And then what you want to do is navigate to resources and go to templates. And then you can see the ones that we've already done. So the strategy builder, the operating plan, and then now we have the OKR builder. And I've already opened it over here. So I wanted to fill out some of the things so we didn't have to make the video so long. But what we're going to do is we're always going to start at the top, right? So the company defines the objectives first because OKRs are cascading, meaning that you start at the top, the company, then it goes down to the executive leadership, if you have executive leadership or leadership, whatever the next layer is. Then we're going to continue down there. Now for this video, it's only me. So I'm just going to go and I'm going to build the company approach for this quarter. And I have some things that I'm going to copy and paste so we don't have to keep it ongoing, but you'll get the understanding and I'll talk through it as we go through. So let's go ahead and fill this out together. So first, as a reminder, if you remember in the operating plan, we started with the strategy because we want to keep that top of mind. So in this one, since we're building the OKRs, we want to start with the operating plan. So what is our objective for this year? It's going to be prove that Grapevine Workplace can replace or reduce. I always go back and forth on this one because I want to say reduce. I don't want to reduce manual coordination for critical cross-functional initiatives. And then our focus areas are going to be design partner acquisition and success, whole product validation, went over that in the last video, narrative and positioning discipline, which is what we're working on right now, founder-led sales, so we can have that with proof driven behind it, internal operating rhythms, and everything that you see here I'm also building inside of Grapevine. So in the last video of this series, I'm going to show you everything that I've done from strategy plan to operating plan to OKRs to initiatives in the next video and how that lives and operates in Grapevine. So that's going to be the internal operating rhythm for our focus areas. So now we're actually going to go to the quarterly objective. What would meaningful progress look like this quarter? So that's taking the operating plan, what we're going to be doing this year and what we're trying to accomplish, and we're breaking it down into a smaller section. This makes it more obtainable, and it also helps us measure each quarter. So we can look at the end of Q1 and say, okay, how are we standing on our yearly goal? We're a quarter of the way done. Where do we stand? So for this one, we're already in Q2. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring this over here. So this is, well, it helps if you copy correctly, right? So, okay. So prove that Grapevine Workplace can replace human coordination from cross-functional initiatives. So that is the objective. And a simple way to think about objectives and key results as we continue down this is the objective is the what. What are we trying to accomplish, right? The key result is the how. How are we going to accomplish what we are trying to achieve, right? And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and pull in all of the key results, and then I'll be able to copy them easier from here. Okay. So now we have the key results, and I'm just going to go through and put them in there. Okay. So now we have all the key results in here. So acquire 5 design partner running real initiatives inside of Grapevine. So this is going to be a count, right? So I'm just going to put 5 here. If we meet our goal, 5 out of 5, it would be at 100%. Where are we starting from? We're starting from 0. Actually, we're starting from 1 right now. Actually 2, sorry. We just signed another customer, so it's still fresh. We're actually starting from 2. So the goal is to really get 3, right? And so now we have the count here. We have 5. We have the baseline that we're shooting from. And then as we continue to go down the key results, we want to make sure that they're relative to the objective. So let's look at this. Prove that Grapevine Workplace can replace human coordination for cross-functional initiatives. How can we prove that? Well, the only real way that we can prove that is if we actually have customers, right? So that's the upfront cost right there. That's what we have to do. And then what else? Support 3 initiatives fully running in Grapevine. So not only do we have to have customers, we have to have them using Grapevine for the specific thing that it was created for, which is cross-functional operations. So we need to have people who can operate those initiatives and track those. And so if we come here, this one's going to be a count again. It's going to be 3. Right now we'll have 1. So now we have to have 2 by the end of the quarter. Then we go down and get 3 written confirmations of reduced manual coordination. Again, this is a count. And so this one's going to be 3. We have 0 right now. So we're going to be going from 0 to 3. And what this one is that proof. Again, if you notice something as we're looking at the key results, they all feed into the objective. And so we have 3 key results. I actually have 4, but the template only has 3 right here. So let's say that it was 4 so I can do easier math here. If it was 4 and we achieved 3 out of 4, then the objective score would be 75%. And in an OKR, these are stretch goals. So you always want to push yourself a little bit beyond your comfort zone. And if you hit 70 plus on your overall objective, that means that you actually succeeded, right? So the goal here, and the reason that I like OKRs is because you're always pushing for a little bit more, right? It's not, we just want to hit 100% and then sandbag it. It's we want to hit where we know 70% is and then try to go above it. Now, if you hit 100%, this is where people get a little bit confused on OKRs. If you hit 100%, it's not actually a great thing. It depends on the OKR. I will say that. But if you hit 100%, then that means that you didn't actually push yourself or the team or the individual on that OKR, that specific OKR, didn't push themselves far enough, right? Okay, so now we have the company level OKR. We have the objective, we have the key results, and then just a good reminder. They should be measurable. They should represent an outcome. They should be connected to the objective, and it must indicate real progress. If we look at every single one of these, acquire 5, support 3, get 3, there's numbers involved. Now, there are different ways that you can go about this. So you have the count, you have the percentage, and you have the revenue. Those are 3 ways that you can easily and quantitatively say, yes, we did this or yes, we didn't. And you can track that. Now, the binary one is the actual yes or no. It's like pass, fail in a college course. You either passed or you failed. You either did this or you didn't. And so whenever it comes to quantitative or even like, I don't want to say fluffy metrics, but whenever you're doing an objective or a key result that is maybe the new baseline or something that can't be measured clearly or not clearly yet because you're establishing something, you at least want to make sure that you word it in a way that you can clearly score it as a yes, we did this, or a no, we didn't do this, or a yes, we achieved this, or no, we didn't achieve this, right? So that's the key thing here. If you're going to choose the count percentage or revenue, you're fine. It's going to be in the key result itself. Now, some people will take the key result or the objective, sorry, and make that have a goal in there too, a quantitative goal. I mean, qualitative goal, that's okay. I don't stray away from it because anything that we can measure with a specific output, that's perfectly fine. But you have to remember that the key results roll up to the overall objective score. So these 3 key results, again, I'm going to say 4 because it's easier math for me. These 4 key results, I can easily say, okay, if we achieved 70+% or 70% plus on 3, then we had a 75% objective score, right? Or if you have the percentage and then you want to get more granular, you can actually say, okay, there's a percentage on here, acquire 20% out of 50 or 100 client calls that turn into design partners, then that would be 5, right? And so then that percentage will go up, but let's not make it complicated right now. Okay, so we have our objectives and our key results for the company. Now you can have multiple if you want to. And so if you do, that's perfectly fine. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here, just going to copy these, and then I'm going to put this here, and then I'll go back up here just so we can keep it in the same frame because I'll show you what I prefer to do. Okay, so we have the company level OKRs. You always want to start at the top because, as I said, it's cascading. When you start at the company, that sets the playing field for what other executive leaders or leadership team members or managers are going to pull from. So the way that I go about this is I would technically tell the team the next layer down to pick a key result that is going to be specific to them and turn it into their objective. So for example, if we're saying acquire 5 design partners running real initiatives inside Grapevine, then what we might actually pull in here from that key result is something like this: build repeatable design partner acquisition and proof engine. Why? Because it is connected to this and it's our objective that we're going to start with, right? So that's what we're trying to accomplish. And then if I pull in the key results that go with the objective, in this case, key result 1, identify 20 qualified operators, because that's who we're going to be targeting. We're going to convert 25% to design partners because that gets us, or it shoots over that 5 number. Remember, these are stretch goals, so we want to shoot over just a little bit. So it might get us around like 6 design partners. And we want to close 25% of those. Now, if I look at this, because ChatGPT helped me with this, that number might not be correct. What I might want to do here is close 50% or greater than 50%, because that gets me to 10. And then if I close 50% of those, then that gets me to 5, right? So we got to make sure that the math adds up too. So if I go back up here, and let's say that this is obviously going to be sales for the function for this example. So if we're pulling acquire 5 design partners running real initiatives inside Grapevine, and we turn this into our objective, what do we have to do to make that key result at the company level real? We have to build a repeatable design partner acquisition and proof engine, meaning basically we need to be able to develop a way through distribution, through content, through XYZ that is going to identify, or that's going to generate 20 qualified operators, right? So that's what we're looking at here. So then we take the objective and we break it down. You should be able to see what's happening here. So we're taking this and we're breaking it down further and further and further. This is why OKRs are so important to organizations that are rapidly growing, because you're doing so many things. You can get pulled in so many different directions. Or for companies that are managing multiple things all at once, right? You're starting at the North Star. That's the company level OKR. And then you take that OKR, and as you go down to the next level, you're pulling directly from what you just created, from the key results that feed into that next layer's objective, that feeds into that next layer's key result. And then the next level down would take these and turn them into their objectives, right? So let's say sales reps, and we're going to take, let's say we want to take identify 20 qualified operators. Now, instead of this being the objective, since we just learned what we just learned, now we want to take this key result and turn it into an objective that our sales reps can focus on. So let's say identify Or actually, let's say, and I had to do this one off the cuff because ChatGPT didn't help me out here. Okay, so now let's take this team level OKR. We're going to take the sales reps and continue down this path. So we're going from company level to leadership level to now the actual team level. And so what we're going to do is let's say that we're going to take this one, key result number one, and we're going to say identify 20 qualified operators. Well, if we want to close those 5 members or the 5 design partners, what does that look like on an individual level? So let's actually turn this into create weekly cadences and processes that drive qualified leads into our pipeline consistently, right? And so now what we do here is we turn this into key results that take that down to the step further. So again, objective, the what. What are we trying to accomplish? So for us at an individual level, we're trying to drive qualified leads into our pipeline. Why? Because our goal is to identify 20 qualified operators, which ultimately feeds into the acquire 5 design partners, which will help us prove that Grapevine Workplace can replace coordination for cross-functional initiatives, because that feeds into our focus areas and our overall 2026 operating plan, which ultimately feeds into our overall strategy that we created before, right? So you see how everything is connected. Okay, let's go back here and let's just create something like this. Connect with 50 operators per month. Key result 2, conduct 5 discovery calls and demos per week. And let's say key result 3, convert 10%, or let's even be realistic, 5% of qualified leads per month. Now, I didn't do the actual numbers, so you want to make sure that the math adds up. But if we do 50 per month, that would be 150. And if we conducted 5 per week, that would be something else. And then if we converted 5%, that's the ultimate number that we would end with. Now, I would have to do the math. I'm doing this off the cuff right now, but you want to make sure that the math adds up to 20 qualified leads to ultimately get to 5 design partners, so we can look at the company level objective and say, yes, we did this. Now, I'm a solo operator, but if you had multiple sales reps, you would probably have higher numbers, but they might have the same OKRs. And that's a good way to be able to measure how people are doing from a performance level. Now, you don't want to use OKRs as a performance metric. That's where KPIs come in. That's where sales quotas come in for this example. But you can look at it and say, okay, rep number 1, they met their OKRs 100%, which means we should have pushed a little bit harder. But rep number 2 got 50%, so maybe that's not actually there, but then you compare it to the actual quota and so on and so forth. It gets a little bit nuanced there, but I just want to call that out so people understand. Okay, so we've defined the company key results. We've talked about the pyramid. Now what we're going to do is go into the company build timeline. This is more for the operational sense of it. Okay, so now we're looking at the timeline. So the timeline is a part that a lot of companies overlook. And the importance of the timeline is really just clarity. So everybody knows what's expected of them, what the timelines are, what the due or the deadlines are. And it's really just this mechanism to make sure that we're pushing the needle forward and getting these completed as soon as possible so we can focus on execution rather than focus on planning. Because that's what a lot of companies do. They'll focus on, I got to get this right. I got to plan. And then before you know it, half of the quarter is already over and you're only really doing half of the execution. So just avoid it by having this timeline. Now, the timeline is going to involve the build timeline. It's going to have the mechanisms of the cadences to keep it top of mind every single week. Then it's going to have the monthly scoring, which is going to be important. So each month within the quarter, you're not hit or being blindsided by the OKR outcomes or the progress that you're making, right? This keeps it top of mind for the organization and the team and the individuals to make sure that they're focused on what matters most. That's what we really mean here. And that's the beauty of OKRs is you're checking it weekly, you're scoring it monthly, and then at the end of the quarter, you're giving the final score of your OKRs, right? And so we'll talk through that. But then at the end of everything, once all the scoring is complete, you're going to hold a company all hands. And that company all hands is going to discuss what we achieved, what we learned, where we fell short, what changes next. And then you're asking about the next quarter and you're already presenting this. So in a perfect world, your OKRs are scored at this point, they're analyzed, and the company level OKRs at the very least are created. In a perfect world, you would have your company level and your leadership level OKRs created. And then that way, after the all hands, once hopefully everybody is pumped up and excited, they can go and work with their managers to build their OKRs. Now, we have automated ways that can help you, or AI assisted ways that can help you on Grapevine that speeds this up significantly. But that's the timeline build. So let's walk through it just a little bit more in detail. So one of the mechanisms here that I like to use is kind of push the deadlines on top of each other, because psychologically speaking, that's going to motivate the company people that are creating the OKRs for the company to make sure that it's done by the 15th. So the leadership team can then get theirs done. So the teams can draft theirs by the 17th, because they're all cascading. So if the company OKRs aren't completed, leadership can't create theirs. If theirs aren't completed, teams can't complete theirs, so on and so forth. So I know that this says week 1, week 2. I would try to give people at the most 3 days, right? Because you want to have them draft. You want to have enough time to review them. And then you want to have enough time to approve them so the next layer down can get theirs ready and completed for the next layer, right? So use that little bit and make sure that you're focused on pushing this as quickly as possible, because you already have the strategy. You already have the OKRs. You're not pulling from thin air. And then once you have the company level OKRs for that quarter, everybody's just pulling from there. Like it takes time to think about it, but we have AI that helps you kind of speed up this process. But push that, make sure that you follow through. And in this case, sometimes you have to be a hard ass a little bit to get people to move on this. Okay, the next part of the timeline is the weekly cadence. So one of the things that I like to say is you don't want to set and forget. This is what a lot of companies do. They'll take all the time in the world to create the strategy. They'll take all the time in the world to focus on the operating plan. They'll even take all the time in the world to create the OKRs. But then once the OKRs are created, they forget about them. So 6, 7, and 8 is a mechanism to make sure that OKRs stay living and breathing throughout that quarter. So your strategy and operating plan continues to move forward, or at least you can measure if it is or if it's not, and what you need to do to move forward, right? So what you want to do through a weekly cadence, the way that I've done it in the past is I'll have a team meeting and I'll just ask the team to pull up their OKRs, tell me what they accomplished last week or this week, depending on what time of the day or time of the week it is. If it's on Monday, it would be last week, what they plan on focusing on to move the needle forward in their OKRs this week, and so on and so forth. But it's really simple. Even if you don't want to have a meeting, just take this, turn it into a template and send it to your team every single week. And so it's like, what is your current status on OKRs? Or you could just use Grapevine and we do an automated check-in. So every single person in the organization gets a check-in notification, and just make sure that they do that every week. And so what they're doing is they're coming in, they're either doing this, we have it automated. So based off of your KRs on the objective and it feeds into it, it'll say you're either on track, off track, at risk, or in progress. And so depending on if you're using our platform or not, make sure that they have the current status in there. Give a little bit of progress update. Like, what did they do to move that needle forward? Are there any blockers here? And then what are the next actions? And what's beautiful about this is if you have them do this asynchronously, so they update it in Grapevine system or they update it in an email or Slack or whatever, now you can go into their one-on-one and discuss any progress updates that they had, any blockers, and the next actions. So it kind of helps you formulate your one-on-ones and continue to move the needle forward on the strategy. Now, the monthly scoring is a little bit different. It's where each month within the quarter, so there's going to be 2 monthly scorings, and then at the end, on the third one, it's going to be the end of quarter scoring. So the monthly scoring is whenever the teammate or the team or the company looks at what they've achieved within that month. And what that's going to tell them is, are we moving in the right direction? If you're anywhere from a 0 to a 0.3, which basically means 30%, 0% to 30%, you didn't make a lot of progress and you need to look into it because that's at risk. we have analytics in our system that tells you what OKRs are at risk and what you need to focus on. Now, if it's a zero point 0.3 plus or 30% or greater, and then in between a 60%, then you're on track, but you might just need to focus on it. It might need attention. That's what we call it in our system. And then if it's anything from 60% up, you're on track. Now, you don't want to just let it fall to the wayside. You want to make sure that you're pushing on that, which is where the weekly check-ins come in. And if anything starts to slip, you can bring it up in the one-on-one or the team meetings that you have and adjust it in near real time instead of waiting until the end of the quarter. Okay. Now, when you're scoring, you want to talk about like what improved from this month. What were we able to achieve? What didn't move? What roadblockers did we have? And what was the reason? This is where you want to get a little bit granular and coach your employees on how to respond to this. Give more detail, especially if you're using Grapevine, because the more information that you have in Grapevine Workplace, the better that our AI systems can analyze and help you move forward or overcome those blockers. And then that's the same thing here. What needs adjustment? But it's still good to do that manual work. So you think about it, right? We can't just have AI doing everything. You have to think about, okay, this is what we improved on. This is what didn't move. This is what needs to adjust for us to have a fully complete and successful OKR for this quarter, right? Okay. Now, the end of the quarter scoring is a little bit different. You're going to look at each key result and objective, and you're going to score it. Now, I could even say that you could just look at the objectives because the key results are going to feed into that overall objective. So take all your objectives and key results, score the OKRs, which basically means if we go back up here, if I go and score my OKR for get 3 written confirmations, how many did I get? Let's say 3. My score is going to be 100%, right? So that it's pretty simple. And then what you're going to do is you're going to allow that to feed into the overall objective. So again, if we had 4 key results, then that if we met 4 key results at 100%, then we achieved our goal at 100%, right? So that would be our score of the objective. And then from the quantitative perspective, what we want to do is reflect on these. And this is where it's super important. And like AI will help you here, but you were the one that was doing the work, or you were assisting AI agents or AI assistants doing the work or managing the team. And so what you want to do, and you can even do this as a team and go through this and say, okay, what worked this quarter? What didn't work this quarter? Where did we misjudge? What slowed us down? And there's going to be certain things that you didn't think about, especially the way that the market is moving so fast with AI changes every single day, right? So be a little bit generous with yourself, but make sure that you take the time to do this, because whenever you go to the next quarter, this is the beauty of OKRs. You're compounding your efforts. And when you don't use something like OKRs or any type of measurement tracking or performance tracking, you're literally starting from scratch, or you're just running your company blind, and people might be going in all different directions. OKRs make sure that we're cascading up in the same direction, hitting that North Star. So take the time to do this, because this is going to feed into your company all hands, right? So now what you're doing is you're taking your entire team's end of quarter scoring, you're finding the themes and the outcomes, and then that ultimately becomes your department level OKR score. And so the way that we did this at Kumu, and the way that I've done it for a couple of other consulting clients, is when we score OKRs, we don't focus on individuals or even teams. We cascade that all the way up to the leadership team, and it becomes the department level OKR score. So we have the score of the overall OKRs that are from the actual quantitative metrics. So this objective achieved this percentage, and we should have anywhere from 3 to 4, 5 at the most objectives for that department. Because remember, they're rolled up. So all of them that were achieved underneath basically cascaded up to form that ultimate score. But then we have the quantitative parts, which is just as important. And so we want to take those scoring pieces of the objectives, put those on the slide deck or the report. But then we also want to add this mechanism of or not the mechanism, but we want to add this reflection or this retrospective of what we actually achieved so we can celebrate it, what we learn so we can take that moving in to the next quarter, what we fell short on so we can, again, learn from that. And what changes next, again, so we can carry that over into the next quarter or change what we focused on into the next quarter. And then what becomes the ultimate next objective. So in the OKRs, company all hands, you're not taking every single thing and throwing it in there. That's too much. That's overwhelming. You're taking the top pieces and you're consolidating it and analyzing it, turning it into insights that help you learn as a company and then help you plan for the next quarter. And as you do this over time as a team, it's going to become a well-oiled machine, right? And even whenever new people come into the organization, now it's become so well-oiled that they just go underneath that person's wing that they're reporting to or that's on the team, and they help them do this as well. Now, one of the things that I do, not as a system check, this is just at the bottom, but one of the things that I do whenever I'm running an OKR program is I create asynchronous messages through video, through documentation, and through standard operating procedures. And every quarter, I will go through and I'll send those refreshers out. I'll also put it in Grapevine, a dedicated workspace. So everything about OKRs gets shared to everyone in the organization. So they know what OKRs are, how we do OKRs at this company, how we score, how we create, what's required, what's not a good OKR. The list goes on and on. But you create this shared knowledge aspect of the OKRs. And as you being the OKR program owner, this saves you so much time. And then whenever you use Grapevine Workplace, it saves you even more time because AI is involved and it just speeds everything up. So take those mechanisms and make sure that you have the asynchronous videos, you have the documentation, you have the SOPs, and then you have that dedicated workspace that people can go into, or a wiki, whatever tool that you're using. And then also just make sure that you have that timeline each quarter, because it's going to be different dates each time. In the best perfect world scenario, you're going to have your OKRs scored a little bit ahead of time before the quarter is closed. I know that that's counterintuitive a little bit, just because, especially if you're in sales, that last day of the quarter means everything sometimes, but you kind of have an idea of what's going to be the outcome. And so instead of waiting until the last minute, the last 2 weeks, go ahead and get people scoring, have that consolidated. So then you can start to go ahead and work on the next quarter's company OKRs. You can go ahead and start planning for the company all hands. And then it's this tight oiled machine again. So I hope that this has been helpful. We have this template on our website along with all the others that you can go to. It's completely free. You can download it after you input it. Every single one is your specific one. So if you fill this out, it's not going to show up on somebody else's. And yeah, that's the end of the OKRs. I know that this was a lot, but if you take this and you really apply it the way that I'm talking about, it turns your strategy and operating plan into something that can be measured. So your strategy and operating plan isn't set and forget. Your OKRs aren't set and forget. And every single quarter, really every single week and month, you're compounding, you're measuring, you know exactly where you are as an organization, as a team, as an individual. That's what I love so much about OKRs. That's why I built part of our feature set with OKRs. But if you have any questions, or if you want me to dive in deeper or create more templates on some of these elements, let me know. But okay, that is the OKR session or course or episode. And the next episode, I'm going to show you how to take OKRs and actually break those down into initiatives. And then at the end of all this, because all of this is specific to Grapevine Workplace and what we're building to help teams make this easier for them, I'm going to show you how every single thing that we discussed can be inside of Grapevine, where you have less manual coordination, more alignment, clarity, and tighter execution. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode.